The grand hall of the Lumina Gallery was a shimmering ocean of perfection. Crystal flutes chimed, their sound a delicate counterpoint to the hushed, melodic murmur of the city's elite. Here, in the heart of Ethelberg, beauty was not a virtue. It was the very air one breathed. I stood by the periphery, my chrono-loom resting on its tripod, its crystalline lens cool against my fingertips. My name is Elian, and I am a resonance profiler. I do not paint portraits of faces. I capture the ephemeral art of the soul expressed upon them. In our world, after the great harmonization a century ago, every human being is born a masterpiece. The genetic code was rewritten to eradicate asymmetry, blemishes, and all perceived imperfections. We are a species of sculpted gods and goddesses, each face a unique yet mathematically perfect canvas. Skin is flawless, eyes are clear and bright, bone structure adheres to the divine golden ratio. Physical beauty is a constant, a given. It is a universal language with only one word. What we trade in, what we covet, is resonance. It is the vibrancy of an expression, the depth of emotion that can flicker across a perfect face. A truly resonant smile can captivate a room. A glance filled with authentic sorrow can break a heart. To be still, to have a face that is beautiful but blank, is the modern-day equivalent of being a leper. It is a sign of an empty inner world, the ultimate social failing. My job is to find the most resonant individuals and archive their expressions, to preserve the fleeting masterpieces of human feeling. Tonight's event was the unveiling of the ephemeral prism, a collection of my latest captures. The city's most influential figures drifted through the gallery, their perfect faces turning towards my work. They saw Minister Aris's look of profound contemplation, captured the moment before he signed the intersolar accords. They saw Liana's laugh, a cascade of pure, unbridled joy that made the very air seem to sparkle. These were the moments people lived for. I was observing the crowd, gauging their reactions, when my gaze snagged on Kael, my colleague and oldest friend. He gave me a sharp, perfect smile from across the room, raising his glass in a silent toast. His resonance was legendary, effortless, charismatic. He was born for this world. I, on the other hand, always felt like a spectator, a skilled technician who understood the mechanics of light, but could never truly feel its warmth. My own face, I knew, was a placid lake, expertly reflecting the emotions of others, but betraying none of its own depths. It was then that it happened. A subtle disturbance rippled through the harmonious flow of the crowd. A gap began to form, a pocket of silent, horrified stillness. It was as if a vacuum had opened in the room, sucking out all the sound and warmth. People were turning away, their perfect features recoiling in a synchronized ballet of disgust. Their eyes, wide with a kind of primal shock, were all fixed on one point. My professional curiosity peaked. I adjusted the focus on my loom's optical sensor, zooming past the flawless shoulders and sculpted jawlines. And then I saw it. I saw her. She was standing near the far wall, half shrouded by a marble column, as if trying to merge with the stone. She was a service attendant, her uniform a simple grey tunic. Her hair was a common shade of chestnut, her eyes a simple, unassuming brown. Her facial structure, from what I could see, was standard, perfect, like everyone else's, except for the flaw. It was a jagged silver line that cut diagonally from the edge of her left eyebrow, bisecting the delicate arch of her cheekbone before terminating just shy of the corner of her mouth. A scar. The word itself felt alien in my mind. a fossil from a forgotten language. I had seen scars in historical archives, in holovids of the before times. They were marks of injury, of disease, of imperfection. They were the very things the harmonization had been designed to eliminate forever. To see one in the flesh, it was like seeing a ghost. It was an obscenity. It was impossible. The crowd's reaction was visceral. A woman nearby gagged, pressing a silk handkerchief to her perfect lips. A man physically shielded his child's eyes, whispering angrily to a security warden. The air, once filled with melodic chatter, was now thick with a suffocating, judgmental silence. The girl, the woman, stood frozen, a pariah in a world of polished stone. Her head was bowed, her shoulders hunched, as if trying to shrink away from the hundreds of perfect eyes piercing her. But I couldn't look away. My training, my entire life, had been about appreciating the beauty of the unblemished canvas. Yet my eyes were glued to that line of broken skin. It was a disruption, a violent slash across a flawless painting. It should have been repulsive. But as I watched her, a strange emotion began to stir within me, something deeper than shock or disgust. The scar was not just a mark, it told a story. It spoke of an event, of force and pain and survival. It was a sentence written in a language my world had deliberately forgotten. While every other face in the room was a perfect, finished statement, hers was a question. It had a history, a past. She risked a glance upwards, and for a fraction of a second, her eyes met the lens of my chrono loom. In that instant, I saw something that shook me more profoundly than the scar itself. It wasn't shame. It wasn't fear. It was a flash of raw, defiant fire. A spark of untamed life that made every other polished expression in the room seem like a pale, lifeless imitation. It was a resonance of a kind I had never seen, born not of joy or sorrow, but of endurance. Then, as quickly as she had appeared, she was gone, scurrying away through a service door swallowed by the gallery's hidden corridors, leaving behind a wake of horrified whispers and a single, indelible image burned into my mind. The perfect people around me slowly regrouped, their composure returning, the shocking moment already being smoothed over, polished away like a smudge on a mirror. But for me, the mirror had been cracked. The harmony was broken. The world felt different, thinner. For the first time, the perfection that surrounded me felt fragile, artificial, lifeless. I stood frozen, my hand still on my loom, the echo of that defiant gaze resonating within me. The night's event, my work, my entire career suddenly felt utterly insignificant. A single, profound question consumed me, drowning out everything else. In a world where everyone is beautiful, what is the true meaning of a flaw? And who was the woman who dared to wear one? The morning after the gallery incident, the city of Ethelberg awoke to its usual, breathtaking perfection. Sunlight, filtered through atmospheric purifiers, cast a golden, blemish-free glow upon the crystalline spires that pierced the sky. Below, citizens glided along the maglev pathways, their faces a diverse gallery of flawless beauty, sharp Slavic cheekbones, warm African jawlines, delicate East Asian eye folds, all harmonized to the same underlying code of perfect symmetry. From my sky-level apartment on the 82nd floor, the world looked like a beautifully orchestrated dream. But today, I saw the strings. My workspace was dominated by the chrono loom. It was less a camera and more a quantum state recorder. It didn't just capture light. It captured the subtle energy fields generated by human emotion, the very essence of resonance. The data was then woven into a four-dimensional hologram, a living portrait. My clients weren't just buying an image, they were buying a preserved moment of emotional authenticity. I replayed the ambient capture from the previous night, isolating the moment the disturbance occurred. There she was, a ghost in the machine. The loom, designed to measure and quantify the pleasing frequencies of high resonance, had registered her presence as a jarring, chaotic spike, a burst of static in a symphony. I zoomed in, the image pixelating slightly, a testament to how far she'd been. The scar was a canyon on the smooth topography of her face. The system had flagged her as a dissonant anomaly, an error. "You're brooding." Kyle's voice, smooth as spun silk, cut through my concentration. He'd let himself in with his key shard, as he often did. He was already holding 2 cups of nutrient-paced coffee, offering one to me. His face today was a study in serene concern, a perfectly calibrated expression. "I'm working," I replied, my tone flatter than I intended. "You're obsessing," he corrected gently, placing the cup beside me. He glanced at the frozen image on the loom's display, his own perfect brow furrowed in a mask of distaste. "The aberration. I can't believe security let something like that get so close. They're usually confined to the undercroft sectors. A processing error, they're saying. A charity hire from the lower zones. Aberration. That was the official term. It was a clinical, sterile word for something that provoked such a primal, gut-level reaction. The Undercroft was the unofficial name for the city's foundational levels. The old infrastructure, the maintenance zones, the places where the gleaming facade of Ethelberg met the dirty reality of its mechanics. It was where the less resonant tended to live, those who struggled to project the vibrant emotional lives society demanded. They weren't outcasts, not officially, they just settled, like sediment, at the bottom. It was more than an error, Kyle. Did you see the look on people's faces? It was primal. Of course, it's a biological imperative, Eli. The harmonization reinforced our instinctual attraction to health, to symmetry. We are hardwired to recoil from deformity. It's a sign of genetic damage, of weakness. It's a mercy that we've eliminated it. He gestured around at the perfect city outside the window. This is peace. This is the end of judgment, of envy, of the tyranny of the genetic lottery. We didn't just cure ugliness, we cured the suffering it caused. He was reciting the doctrine we'd been taught since birth. The before times were painted as a barbaric age where people were judged on the randomness of their appearance. Wars were fought, lives ruined, all because of a crooked nose or asymmetrical eyes. The harmonization was our salvation, a triumph of rational, compassionate science. To question it was like questioning the virtue of healing the sick. But we haven't ended judgment, I countered, turning from the screen to face him. We just changed the criteria. Now we judge people on the vibrancy of their smile. We fear the stillness more than our ancestors feared death. The stillness. It was the great social disease of our time. To have a face that didn't express, that remained a placid, beautiful mask. It suggested a lack of inner life, of empathy, of soul. The still were ostracized, sent to resonance therapists, treated with emotional stimulants. They were seen as hollow shells, beautiful but empty. It was my greatest fear. I, who could see and catalogue the emotions of others so clearly, often felt a terrifying void within myself. I was a connoisseur of a feast I could not taste. Kyle's expression softened into one of genuine friendship, a look he knew I found reassuring. That's different, Eli. Resonance is a skill. It can be learned, practiced. It's a meritocracy of the spirit. Appearance was an accident of birth. This is earned. You of all people should appreciate that. You're the master of capturing it. He was right, of course. He was always right. But his logic felt brittle today. I looked back at the image of the scarred woman. Her defiance wasn't practiced. It wasn't a performance of resonance for social gain. It was raw and real, like a volcano erupting through a manicured garden. What happens to them? I asked, my voice low. The aberrations. Kyle shrugged, taking a sip of his coffee. Corrective treatment if possible. Gene resequencing. If not, they are encouraged to live where they won't cause public distress. In the undercroft. It's kinda that way. For them and for us. Why are you so fixated on this? It was an ugly, fleeting moment. Forget it. Let's talk about the Prism exhibit. Minister Aris wants to commission a private resonance portrait of his new daughter. It's a huge opportunity. I nodded, pretending to listen, but my mind was elsewhere. Corrective treatment. The phrase sent a chill down my spine. The idea of erasing that scar, of smoothing over that history, felt like a desecration. It felt like burning a book because you didn't like its cover. All day I tried to work. I pulled up the schematics for the minister's commission, reviewed candidates for my next project on communal joy, and answered congratulatory messages about the gallery opening. But my focus was fractured. Every perfect face I looked at seemed incomplete. They were beautiful, yes, but they were surfaces. They were a tranquil sea, and I had just witnessed the shocking, glorious breach of a leviathan. That evening I did something I hadn't done in years. I accessed the primary historical archives, bypassing the sanitized educational summaries. I searched for pre-harmonization terms: scar, wrinkle, flaw, imperfection. The screen filled with images that would make a modern citizen physically ill. Faces of old people, their skin a roadmap of their lives. Soldiers with battle scars. Survivors of accidents. Children with birthmarks. The archives framed it all as a gallery of horrors, a testament to the suffering the harmonization had ended. But I looked at the face of an old woman, her eyes crinkling into 1,000 tiny lines as she laughed, and I saw a depth, a character, that made Liana's perfect, resonant joy seem like a child's drawing next to a masterpiece. I saw a photograph of a father with a faded scar on his chin, kissing his daughter, and the love in his eyes felt more potent, more real, than anything I had ever captured with my loom. These faces weren't just canvases for fleeting emotions. They were the emotions. They were the story, carved into flesh. Our perfection wasn't a canvas. It was a wall. A beautiful, impenetrable wall. I closed the archives, my heart pounding. Kyle's words echoed in my mind. It's kinda that way. Was it? Was it kind to trade the story of a life for a lifetime of hollow beauty? Was it compassion to erase the evidence of our struggles, our survival? I pulled up the gallery's security footage again, cross-referencing employee manifests. Geneva, L-Service Technician, Level 4. Residence, Undercroft Sector Gamma 7. A name. A location. It was a transgression, a violation of privacy, a step into a world I was supposed to pretend didn't exist. But the question from the night before had morphed into a burning, obsessive need. I had to understand. As I stared at the name on the screen, a new, more dangerous question began to form in my mind, a whisper of heresy against the gospel of our perfect world. What if the flaw I saw wasn't a sign of her damage, but of ours? The decision to seek her out felt like stepping off a ledge in my mind. For days I was paralyzed by it. My life was a meticulously constructed edifice of order, safety, and prestige. I was Elian, the resonance profiler, the artist of the soul. My path was clear, my future bright. To deliberately walk toward an aberration, into the forgotten depths of the undercroft, was an act of self-sabotage. It was madness. And yet, the alternative, to return to my life of capturing polished, perfect emotions, felt like a slow, suffocating death. The stillness I feared in others was beginning to feel like my own reflection. My dreams became haunted. They were no longer the abstract, anxious voids they once were. Now they were filled with the memory of my grandfather. He had passed when I was a boy, one of the last generations to be born just before the harmonization was universally implemented. He was old, from a time when old was a concept. I remembered his hands more than his face. His hands were not the smooth, ageless appendages of the men in my world. They were landscapes, gnarled, roped with veins, the skin dotted with faint brown spots and crisscrossed with 100 tiny silvery lines. As a child, I had been fascinated by them. I would trace the lines with my small, perfect finger. "What are these, Graham?" I had asked him once. He had smiled, a gentle, tired expression on his still handsome but subtly asymmetrical face. "They're maps, Eli. Maps of where I've been. This one," he said, pointing to a pale scar across his knuckle, "is from a fall I took climbing the old city ruins as a boy. And this one," he touched a patch of rough skin on his palm, "is from a lifetime of holding your grandmother's hand." At the time, I hadn't understood. My world had no ruins, and hands were for gesturing, not for holding so tightly they left a mark. But now, in the sterile silence of my apartment, that memory was a beacon. My grandfather's hands were like the woman's face. They had a history. They were real. My own hands were smooth, elegant, perfect. They had never known rough work, never borne a scar. They operated the complex machinery of the chrono-loom, but they had never truly touched the world. I looked at them and felt a profound sense of poverty. I was rich in perfection but destitute in experience. This inner turmoil began to bleed into my work. During a profiling session with a young poet celebrated for her melancholic resonance, I found myself unable to connect. She sat before my loom, her flawless face a mask of exquisite, fashionable sadness. Her eyes welled with perfectly formed tears that traced clean paths down her sculpted cheeks. It was technically brilliant, a masterpiece of emotional performance. A year ago, I would have been ecstatic, carefully calibrating my loom to capture every nuance. But now I saw only the performance. I saw the careful practice, the social conditioning. Her sadness felt curated, an accessory worn to enhance her beauty. It lacked the jagged, untamed quality of the scarred woman's defiance. "Is something wrong, Master Elian?" the poet asked, her voice a melodious whisper of sorrow. "Is my resonance insufficient?" I forced a smile, the muscles in my face feeling alien and stiff. No, it's perfect. Forgive me. A momentary distraction." I finished the session on autopilot, my mind 1,000 meters below, in the shadowed world of the Undercroft. The fear I had of the place was slowly being eclipsed by a magnetic pull. The fear wasn't just of the unknown or of the social stigma. It was a deeper, more personal terror. I was afraid of what I might find out about myself. I had spent my life as an observer, safely behind a lens. To go down there was to step onto the stage. What if, when confronted with something so real, I discovered I was truly as hollow as I feared. What if my own stillness was not a mood, but a permanent condition? That night, I made my choice. I put on a simple dark tunic, a stark contrast to my usual tailored jackets. I left my chronolume, my professional identity, behind. As I stood before the elevator, my reflection in the polished obsidian doors showed a perfect, handsome stranger with wide, anxious eyes. The face was calm, but the resonance it projected was a chaotic storm of fear and resolve. The journey downward was a descent through the strata of our society. The upper levels were silent, swift, the maglev cars gliding through tubes of light. As we descended, the cars became more crowded, the light dimmer. The melodic chimes announcing each level were replaced by a harsh, functional buzz. The perfect faces around me became less radiant. They were still flawless, but a weariness clung to them. The performance of resonance was a luxury, and down here people were too tired to put on a show. They were closer to the stillness, their beauty a default setting rather than a vibrant display. Finally, the car hissed to a stop. The display read, Sector Gamma 7, Utility and Residence. The doors opened not to a gleaming plaza, but to a cavernous, humid space. The air smelled of ozone, recycled water, and something else, something organic and metallic. The ceiling was a tangled web of massive pipes and conduits, weeping condensation that pattered onto the worn permacrete floor. The light was industrial, a flat, shadowless yellow that leached the color from everything. This was the Undercroft. It wasn't a slum, not in the pre-harmonization sense. It was clean, orderly, but it was utterly devoid of the aesthetic grace of the upper city. It was a place of function, not form. The people here moved with a purpose that felt different. They weren't gliding, they were walking. Their expressions were not for display. They were functional, directed, or simply turned inward. I checked the address on my datapad. Geneva, L Residence 42C, Habitation Block Delta. My heart hammered against my ribs. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back, to return to my clean, orderly, beautiful world. I was an intruder here, a tourist in the land of the forgotten. But the image of her face, of that scar, drove me forward. It was a compass needle, pulling me toward an unknown magnetic north. I walked through the cavernous spaces, past blocks of identical habitation units, their doors all the same flat gray. The perfection here was one of monotony, not beauty. I found Block Delta and climbed a set of metal stairs to the 4th level. The air grew thicker, heavier. I stopped in front of door 42C. It was no different from any other. I raised my perfect, trembling hand to press the chime, the polished skin of my knuckles a stark contrast to the dull, utilitarian metal. For a long moment, I hesitated. This was the point of no return. Once I pressed that button, I was no longer just a curious observer. I was a participant. I was involving myself in the life of an aberration. What was I hoping to find? An answer? An explanation? Or was I simply hoping to see something, anything, that would make my own sterile existence feel less real? With a deep, shuddering breath, I pressed the chime. The sound was a dull electronic buzz that seemed to echo the frantic beating of my own heart. And I waited, utterly terrified of who or what I was about to face. The seconds after the chime felt like an eternity. I heard a faint shuffling from within, the sound of life, and my stomach clenched. The door didn't slide open with a silent hiss like the ones in the upper city. It unlocked with a heavy mechanical clunk, and then swung inward on physical hinges, groaning in protest. And there she was, Her name was Geneva, but my mind knew her only as the scarred woman. She was smaller than I remembered, and without the gallery's dramatic lighting, she seemed less like a mythical creature and more human. She wore the same simple grey tunic, but her hair was tied back, revealing the full, shocking topography of her face. Up close, the scar was not just a line. It was a landscape of tissue, paler and smoother than the surrounding skin, with a faint pucker where it met her eyebrow. It was a testament to violence, an indelible mark of a moment I couldn't begin to imagine. Her brown eyes, clear and direct, widened in recognition. Then they narrowed with suspicion, with a deep, weary defensiveness. Her body tensed, her hand still on the edge of the door, ready to slam it shut. "What do you want?" Her voice was not the melodic, trained instrument of an upworlder. It was lower, huskier, and held a flat, challenging tone. It was a voice that wasn't trying to please. I opened my mouth, but the carefully rehearsed words I'd prepared evaporated. Faced with her raw reality, my social graces, my entire upworld persona felt like a cheap costume. I'm Elian, I stammered, my own voice sounding ridiculously smooth and polished in the stark hallway. I was at the Lumina Gallery. I'm the resonance profiler. I saw you. A bitter, humorless smile touched her lips, but it didn't reach her eyes. The scar moved with the expression, a jarring reminder of its presence. Everyone saw me. It's hard to miss a monster at the beauty pageant. No, I said more forcefully than I intended. I'm not here to judge you. Aren't you? She shot back, her gaze sweeping over me, taking in my fine-spun tunic, my perfect posture, the inherent gloss of my existence. You're one of them, an artist of the flawless. What could you possibly want from an aberration? She spat the word out like it was poison. Her hostility was a wall, but it was a wall I had to breach. I want to understand, I said, the words finally coming, raw and honest. That mark on your face. It's the only thing I've seen in years that felt real. Everything else, I gestured vaguely upward toward the gleaming city I'd left behind, is a performance. A beautiful, empty performance. I capture it. I catalog it. But I don't think I believe in it anymore. My confession hung in the humid air between us. It was a dangerous thing to admit, a heresy. Her expression flickered. The hard suspicion was still there, but a sliver of something else. Curiosity, perhaps, crept in. She studied my face, not with the aesthetic appreciation of an upworlder, but with a penetrating, analytical gaze, as if searching for cracks in my own perfect facade. Real, she repeated, the word tasting strange in her mouth. You come down to the dregs of the city, to the home of a genetic error, looking for something real. You upworlders are more broken than I thought. Despite the insult, I felt a spark of hope. She hadn't slammed the door. Please, I said, my voice dropping to a near whisper. I'm not who you think I am. I feel hollow, like the stillness is consuming me. When I saw you, the look in your eyes, it wasn't still. It was the opposite of still. I need to understand why. She was silent for a long time, her eyes tracing the lines of my face. I felt utterly exposed, my perfect features no longer a shield, but a confession of my own emptiness. Finally, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the entire city above us, she stepped back. Get in, she said, her voice flat, before you draw attention. The inside of her habitation unit was small, cramped, and ruthlessly functional. There was a fold-down cot, a small food prep station, and a single chair. There were no decorations, no holoscreens displaying pleasant vistas, no personal touches, except for one. On a small shelf above the cot sat a collection of small, strange objects. A piece of rusted metal, twisted into a unique shape. A smooth grey stone from a riverbed that no longer existed. A shard of colored glass, its edges worn smooth by time. They were worthless, ugly things by any upworld standard. They were junk. And yet, she had displayed them like treasures. She gestured to the lone chair, and I sat, feeling large and clumsy in the small space. She leaned against the opposite wall, her arms crossed, her scarred face a mask of cautious neutrality. "My name is Lyra," she said, finally giving me a name to replace the labels my world had assigned her. "Elian," I repeated, feeling the need to reintroduce myself on this new, more level ground. "So, the great resonance profiler is having an existential crisis," she said, her tone laced with biting irony. "He sees a freak and thinks he's found the meaning of life. It's almost poetic." "It's not like that," I insisted, leaning forward. "That scar, how did it happen?" Lyra's hand instinctively went to her cheek, her fingers hovering over the mark without touching it. Her expression darkened, the memory clouding her eyes. "An accident when I was a child, and I was a support beam in one of the old decommissioned sectors gave way. It was messy. I imagined it. The chaos, the pain, the terror. In my world, a child would be rushed to a regeneration clinic. The skin would be seamlessly repaired, the trauma erased by memory dampeners. But Lyra, she was left with the evidence." "They didn't fix it?" I asked, the question sounding naive even to my own ears. She laughed, a short, sharp, bitter sound. "Fix it? We were in a deep-level maintenance crew. My parents were, like me. We lived off-grid, unofficially. By the time they got me to a sanctioned medical unit, the tissue had already healed. The damage was set. To fix it would have required a full cellular regression. Too complex, too expensive, especially for a non-essential family with aberrant markers." She looked at me, her eyes hard. "They offered to put me in a care facility, to hide me away so I wouldn't have to suffer the horror of being seen. My parents refused." Her words painted a picture of a world I never knew existed. A world of shadows, of off-grid communities, of people who fell through the cracks of our perfect society. A world where a healing wound was not a priority. "You said your parents were like you," I pressed, sensing a deeper story. She hesitated, her gaze dropping to the floor. "The scar is from an accident," she said slowly. "But my existence is not. My genes carry the dissonant marker. It's recessive. It means the harmonization in my family line is unstable. My parents had it. I have it. It means we are susceptible to change, to damage, to scarring, to reality." She looked up and her eyes burned with an intensity that made my breath catch. "You think your world is perfect, Elian, but it's a cage, a beautiful, gilded cage. You've traded the truth of the human body for a sterile ideal. You've traded the stories written on our skin for a blank page. You look at me and see a flaw. I look at you, at all of you, and I see ghosts. Beautiful, elegant ghosts, afraid of the slightest breeze." Her words hit me like a physical blow. A blank page. Ghosts. She saw my world, my life's work, with a clarity that was both terrifying and exhilarating. She wasn't just a victim of circumstance. She was a keeper of a different philosophy, a different way of being. I stood up, drawn by an impulse I didn't understand, and walked toward the shelf of trinkets. I pointed to the piece of rusted metal. "What is this?" "A piece of the beam that fell," she said quietly. My fingers trembled as I reached out and touched it. It was rough, cold, and real. It was a piece of her story, a material fact in a world of illusion. "There are more of us," she said, her voice dropping lower, becoming conspiratorial. "Not many, but we're here. People who carry the dissonance. People who believe that perfection is a prison. We live down here, in the places you've forgotten, and we remember." She took a step closer, her scarred face just inches from my own. I could see the fine texture of her skin, the way the scar tissue pulled ever so slightly at her lip. It wasn't ugly. It was profound. It was a landmark. "You want to see something real, Profiler?" she whispered, her breath warm against my cheek. "You want to see what your world has tried to erase? Then stop looking at me like a museum exhibit and start listening." Her challenge hung in the air, a gateway to a world of unimaginable secrets. Was I brave enough to step through it, to truly see what lay hidden in the foundations of our perfect society? My trial had just begun, and I knew, with a certainty that chilled me to the bone, that the path forward would demand more than just courage. It would demand that I shatter the very lens through which I saw the world. Lyra's challenge was a key turning in a lock I didn't know existed. In the days that followed, she became my reluctant guide into the secret heart of the Undercroft. Our meetings were clandestine, held in the humming guts of the city. We met in echoing sewer junctions where the roar of recycled water drowned out all conversation for those without audio dampeners. We met in abandoned geothermal vents, the air thick with the planet's heat. These were the spaces between the spaces, the arteries and intestines of Ethelberg, invisible and ignored by the pristine world above. She did not trust me easily. My perfect face, my soft hands, my upworld accent, they were the uniform of the enemy. I was a tourist in her suffering. But my hunger to understand was relentless, and it was a hunger she had never encountered before. I didn't pity her. I didn't want to fix her. I was envious. I envied her scar. I envied the reality it represented. This strange, heretical envy was my passport into her world. One night, she led me deeper than ever before, through a maze of maintenance tunnels to a heavy, pressurized door that wasn't on any city schematic I had ever seen. She placed her palm on a scanner that glowed not with the cool blue of official tech, but with a warm amber light. "It reads biosignatures," she explained, her voice low. "Not just fingerprints. It reads the dissonant marker in our blood, the instability. It keeps the perfects out." The door hissed open, revealing not another grimy tunnel, but a space that stole my breath. It was a vast, cavernous cistern, long ago decommissioned, but it had been transformed. Strings of warm, low-wattage lights were strung between the massive pillars, casting a gentle golden glow. The air was filled with the smell of soil and growing things. In huge, repurposed containers, people were tending to gardens, growing actual imperfect vegetables, a lumpy potato, a crooked carrot. Children's laughter echoed in the vast space, a sound so raw and unrestrained it was almost shocking. And the people, they were a gallery of the impossible. An old man sat on a crate, carving a piece of wood. His face was a magnificent, deeply lined map of a century of life, his eyes twinkling with a wisdom I had never seen. A woman with a large, dark birthmark across her neck was teaching a group of children, her smile unself-conscious and radiant. I saw a young man with a slight limp walking hand in hand with a girl whose ears were charmingly asymmetrical. It was a village of flaws, a sanctuary of imperfection, and it was the most beautiful place I had ever seen. "Welcome to the echo," Lyra said softly, watching my face. "It's what we call ourselves, the echo of what was lost." I was speechless. I walked through the settlement like a man in a dream. No one recoiled from me, but they watched me with a cautious curiosity. My perfection marked me as an outsider more profoundly than Lyra's scar had marked her in the gallery. Here, I was the aberration. An elderly man with a kind, wrinkled face and a distinctively crooked nose approached us. This was Silas, the community's de facto elder. Lyra introduced me with a simple, "He wants to learn." Silas looked at me, his gaze piercing. "A profiler," he said, his voice raspy with age. "You capture the surface. Here, we honor the depths. What do you see here, Upworlder?" I struggled for words. "I see life, uncurated life." Silas nodded slowly. The harmonization was sold as a gift, a cure for the pains of the flesh, but it was a poison for the soul. When you remove the possibility of a scar, you remove the possibility of heroic survival. When you remove the lines of age, you remove the evidence of wisdom. When you smooth away every flaw, you smooth away the very texture of identity. He led me to a small, quiet corner of the cistern where a simple terminal glowed. "The dissonance movement didn't begin as a rebellion," he explained, his gnarled fingers tapping at the screen. "It began as a regret, a secret held by the very architect of your perfect world." He brought up an image, a black and white photograph from the before times. It was of a handsome, brilliant-looking man with intense eyes. Dr. Aris Thorne, the father of the harmonization. Beside him stood a woman with a warm, intelligent face, marked by a small, crescent-shaped scar above her lip. "Thorne's wife, Ilara," Silas said. "She died in an accident a year before the harmonization was completed. That scar. He loved that scar. It was from a childhood fall, and he said it was the one part of her face that was uniquely hers. A tiny flaw that made her perfect beauty accessible, human. After she was gone, he became obsessed with eliminating the kind of random cruelty that took her. He wanted to conquer pain, injury, death. He created the harmonization." My mind reeled. The foundation of our entire society was built on a man's heartbreak. "But he went too far," Silas continued. "In his grief, he created a world of perfect dolls, a world where his Ilara, with her beautiful, unique flaw, could never exist. He realized his mistake too late. The project was too big, the public desire for perfection too overwhelming. So he did the only thing he could. He built a back door. He typed another command, and a string of complex genetic code filled the screen. "The dissonant marker," Silas whispered, his voice filled with awe. Thorne secretly embedded it into the harmonization code. A recessive trait, a genetic ghost. It lies dormant in millions of you Upworlders. But in some families, through generations of intermingling, it becomes active. It doesn't make us ugly. It simply makes the harmonization's hold on our biology unstable. It allows us to be marked by life again. It allows us to be human. My grandparents were among the first Thorns secretly contacted. My parents, now me. We are the legacy of his regret. The revelation was staggering, a seismic shock that reconfigured my entire understanding of reality. This wasn't a community of genetic mistakes. They were a deliberate legacy, a secret, living testament to the failure of perfection. "But there's more," Lyra said, her voice grim. She took over the terminal, bringing up medical charts, population statistics, all drawn from data they had secretly siphoned from the city's networks for decades. The harmonization had a cost Thorne never anticipated, a slow, creeping price. Look, the data was undeniable. Birth rates in the upper city had been in a steady, almost imperceptible decline for 50 years. Cases of profound, untreatable stillness were rising, especially among the youngest generations. And then there was the most terrifying chart, a measure of telomere degradation. The very ends of the chromosomes which dictate aging and cellular regeneration were showing signs of brittleness. "Your perfection is sterile," Lyra said, her voice cold with a terrible certainty. "The code is too perfect. It doesn't know how to handle variance, how to adapt. It's like a song with only one note. At first it's pure, but eventually it's just silence. We, the dissonant, with our flaws and our messy genetics, our birth rates are stable. Our children are vibrant. We get sick, we get hurt, we get old, but we live. Your people," she gestured upward, "are becoming beautiful statues in a museum that is slowly, quietly, closing its doors forever." I stumbled back, my hand on my chest, my heart pounding. The truth was so much bigger, so much more horrifying than I could have ever imagined. Our beauty wasn't just a cage. It was a tomb. A glorious, gleaming, perfect tomb. Perfect. We were a dying race, admiring our own reflections as we faded away. And these people, the echo, the aberrations my world despised and hid away, they weren't the past. They were the only possible future. As this monumental truth settled upon me, a new alert flashed on the terminal screen. It was a security feed from the tunnel entrance. My blood ran cold. On the screen was a familiar figure, his face a mask of concerned determination, his perfect, charismatic resonance broadcasting even through the grainy camera. It was Kyle. He had followed me, and he was leading a squad of Aegis wardens, their polished armor gleaming in the tunnel's dim light. He had found their sanctuary. He had found the secret. Lyra looked from the screen to my face, her own a canvas of dawning horror and ultimate betrayal. "You," she whispered, the single word an indictment that shattered my soul. "You led them here." The word "you" echoed in the vast cistern, a ricocheting bullet of accusation. For a heart-stopping moment, the entire community froze. The children stopped playing. The old man, Silas, looked up from his terminal, his wrinkled face a mask of profound, sorrowful understanding. The laughter and life that had filled the space just moments before were extinguished, replaced by a silence more terrifying than any I had ever known. All eyes turned to me, the perfect polished Trojan horse who had led destruction to their gates. "No," I choked out, desperation clawing at my throat. "I didn't. I wouldn't." But Lyra wasn't listening. Her face, the face I had come to see as a symbol of truth, was now contorted with a pain and fury that eclipsed the defiance I had first admired. It was the look of someone who had dared to trust and been savagely punished for it. "They followed you," she spat, her voice a low, dangerous snarl. "We let you in, and you led the wolves to our door." Panic flared in my chest, hot and suffocating. On the security monitor, Kyle and the Aegis wardens were working on the door, their plasma torches casting stark, dancing shadows in the tunnel. They would be through in minutes. "I didn't know," I pleaded, turning to Silas. You have to believe me. He's my friend. He must have been worried. He doesn't understand. Silas placed a calming, gnarled hand on Lyra's arm, though his eyes remained fixed on me, his expression unreadable. Understanding is a luxury we won't have for long, Elian. Whether you led them here by malice or by foolishness, the result is the same. They are here. His voice was not angry, but it carried the weight of an impending tragedy. Chaos erupted. People were scrambling, grabbing their children, gathering what few precious belongings they had. The peaceful sanctuary had become a trap. There were other ways out, hidden, narrow passages known only to them, but they needed time. Time I had stolen from them. I felt a crippling, useless paralysis. My world, my friend, my own naive quest for meaning, was about to destroy the only real thing I had ever found. Lyra, galvanized by the crisis, was shouting orders, her voice sharp and clear, directing people toward an escape route behind a waterfall of recycled water. She was a leader, forged in the reality of survival. I was just a spectator, a catalyst for disaster. Suddenly, a section of the main door glowed cherry red and then burst inward with a deafening shriek of tortured metal. A squad of Aegis wardens clad in white and chrome armor, their faces hidden behind impassive reflective helmets, poured into the cistern. They moved with a chilling, synchronized efficiency, fanning out, their pulse rifles held at the ready. They were the embodiment of sterile, unfeeling order. And then Kyle stepped through the breach. He wasn't wearing a helmet. His perfect, handsome face was on full display, his expression a mixture of shock, disgust, and a twisted kind of righteousness. He took in the scene, the dirt, the imperfect tools, the flawed, terrified faces of the Echo, and his features hardened. He saw not a community but an infection, a disease that had taken root in the foundations of his perfect world. His eyes scanned the chaos and found me. Relief washed over his face, immediately followed by stern resolve. Elian, thank the harmonizers. I was so worried. Get away from them. I'm here to take you home. Kale, no, I shouted, stepping between him and the cowering families. You don't understand what this place is. You can't do this. I understand perfectly, he said, his voice ringing with the conviction of a zealot. He took a step forward, his gaze falling on Lyra, who stood defiantly near the waterfall trying to shield a group of children. His eyes narrowed on her scar, and a look of profound revulsion crossed his face. I understand that you've been corrupted by this filth, this genetic rot. I followed you to protect you, Eli, and now I see I have to protect us all. He raised a hand, and the wardens leveled their rifles. They didn't fire lethal rounds. The rifles emitted a low hum, charging for a concussive, paralyzing blast. They are not a disease, I screamed, my voice raw. They are the cure. Our perfection, Kyle, it's killing us. It's a lie. Kyle just shook his head, a look of deep pity in his eyes. It was the look one gives to a beloved friend who has lost his mind. The stillness has taken you, Eli. You're confused. Don't worry. We have therapies. We can fix this. We can make you whole again. He thought he was saving me. This was the ultimate betrayal, more painful than any malice. It was a betrayal born of love, of a friendship so steeped in the ideology of our world that it could not see the truth. He would destroy this entire community, erase this vital culture, all to save me from a reality he was incapable of comprehending. Lyra saw the wardens taking aim at the last group of people scrambling for the exit. Without a second's hesitation, she ran from the relative safety of the waterfall, drawing attention to herself, trying to buy them a few more seconds. "Here!" she yelled, her voice a defiant cry. "Look at me! Look at the monster!" Kyle's eyes locked onto her. "Detain the primary aberration," he commanded, his voice cold as ice. "She is the source of the contagion." Two wardens broke formation and advanced on Lyra. She stood her ground, her fists clenched, her scarred face a beautiful, terrible mask of pure defiance. She was ready to fight, to die, for her people. In that moment, everything crystallized for me. My life as an observer was over. The lens I had hidden behind was shattered. There were no more profiles to take, no more emotions to catalogue. There was only the choice. My friend, my world, my past, or this woman, this community, this brutal, beautiful, flawed truth. As the wardens moved to grab her, I reacted. It wasn't a thought. It was an instinct, a surge of a resonance so powerful it felt like my soul was on fire. I ran, my body moving faster than I ever thought possible, and I threw myself in front of Lyra, my arms spread wide. I was a shield of perfect, unblemished flesh, protecting the flawed, sacred truth behind me. I stared directly at Kyle, my best friend, my betrayer. My face, which had for so long been a placid lake, was now a storm. I channeled every ounce of the horror, the anger, the love, and the terrible, liberating clarity I felt into a single look. "If you want her," I said, my voice shaking but clear, "you will have to go through me." Kyle's face crumpled. He saw not the stillness he feared, but a resonance more powerful and terrifying than any he had ever witnessed. It was the resonance of a man who had finally found something to live and die for. For a moment he hesitated, his entire worldview rocked by the loyalty of his friend to the very thing he sought to destroy. The air crackled with tension, a standoff between two friends, two worlds, two definitions of humanity. Then, his jaw tightened. His pity hardened back into resolve. He gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod to the warden beside him. I saw the warden's rifle shift, not towards Lyra, but towards me. I had time for one last look at her face, a silent apology, and a promise. Then the world dissolved into a blinding white light and a wave of crushing, absolute silence. The white light receded, replaced by the sterile, luminescent ceiling of a room I knew all too well. A reconciliation chamber. The air was cool and smelled faintly of sedatives and ozone. I was lying on a biofoam couch, dressed in a soft white tunic. My body felt heavy but unharmed. The stillness they had shot me with was a potent, non-lethal neuroparalytic. It didn't just stun the body. It was designed to quiet the mind, to smooth the turbulent waters of extreme emotional states. But my mind was not quiet. It was a raging sea. Lyra's face, contorted in defiant fury. Silas's sorrowful eyes. Kyle's look of loving, destructive pity. These images were burned onto the inside of my eyelids. A figure moved into my field of vision. It was Kyle. He was dressed in a simple tunic, not his official Aegis attire. His face was a carefully constructed mask of gentle concern, but I could see the strain beneath it. I could see the lie. "Elian," he said softly, his voice the melodic balm I had once found so comforting. "You're awake. Don't try to move too much. The paralytic takes a while to wear off completely." I tried to sit up, my muscles protesting. "Where is she?" I rasped, my throat dry. "Where is Lyra? What did you do to them?" Kyle's expression tightened. "The dissonants are being processed. They're receiving the care they need. Genetic therapy, resonance conditioning. We're helping them, Eli. We're freeing them from their deformities, their suffering. Freeing them. My voice rose, cracking with disbelief. You've destroyed them. You've lobotomized their culture, their history. You've taken their stories and you're burning the pages. Their stories were of pain and decay, Kyle shot back, his composure finally cracking, revealing the zealot beneath. We are giving them a new story, a story of wholeness, of beauty, of belonging, and Lyra, the primary aberration. She is undergoing full regressive therapy. They'll erase the scar. They'll stabilize her genome. She'll be perfect. She'll be one of us. She'll thank us one day. The thought was a physical violation. The idea of them smoothing over Lyra's scar, of erasing the mark of her survival and replacing it with the same empty perfection as everyone else. It was an act of profound violence. They weren't just healing a wound. They were assassinating a soul. And you? I asked, my voice dropping to a dangerous calm. What's my treatment? Resonance conditioning to make me forget? Memory dampeners to erase what I've seen? Kyle looked away, unable to meet my eyes. It's for your own good, Eli. You've been exposed to a deep-level ideological contagion. We have to cleanse it. You are a great artist, a valued citizen. We can't lose you to this madness. He looked back at me, his eyes pleading. I'm your friend. I am doing this for you. In that moment, I saw the chasm between us, wider and deeper than the vertical distance between the undercroft and the sky. He would never understand. His love was a cage, his help a poison. My choice was clear, but it was not a choice between two paths. The path back to my old life was already a ruin. My only choice was what to do in the face of my own destruction. I had one weapon left. My art. My identity. The very thing he thought he was saving. I lay back on the couch, letting my body go limp. I softened my expression, letting the fire in my eyes die down to embers. I projected an aura of exhausted defeat. You're right, I whispered, the words tasting like ash. I'm confused. The things they said, they twisted my mind. I want to come home, Kyle. I want to be whole again. Relief flooded his face, so pure and complete it was almost painful to watch. He had his friend back. He had won. I knew it, he breathed. I knew you were still in there. We'll start the therapy tomorrow. Rest now. Everything is going to be perfect again. He left, leaving me in the silent white room. The door hissed shut, locking me in my luxurious prison. But he had made a fatal mistake. He had given me time. He had left me alone with my mind, and with the one tool they hadn't thought to take from me. In my head, a plan began to form, born of desperation and a terrible sacrificial love. My chronoloom was in my studio, likely under guard, but my personal data pad, the one I used for preliminary sketches and notes, was still in the pocket of the tunic I'd been wearing. They'd see it as a simple communication device, harmless. But it contained a rudimentary version of the loom's software, the weave. It couldn't capture resonance from others, but it could create it. It could translate my own thoughts, my memories, my feelings, into a raw data stream of pure emotional energy. I had one night. With trembling fingers, I began to work. I didn't have the strength to stand, so I lay on the couch, my eyes closed, my mind my studio. I became my own chronoloom. I didn't try to create a beautiful, harmonious portrait of joy or sorrow. I reached for the chaos. I reached for the truth. I began with the image of Lyra's scar. I didn't just render its shape. I poured the memory of its story into it. The falling beam, the pain, the defiance. I wove in the sound of her bitter laughter, the feel of the rusted metal from the beam. It became a symphony of survival, jagged and dissonant and breathtakingly real. Then, I added Silas's hands, every line and wrinkle of verse in an epic poem of a life lived. I layered in the sound of his raspy voice, the memory of his kind, sad eyes. I wove in the laughter of the children in the echo, raw and unrestrained. I added the taste of the crooked, earthy carrot Lyra had given me, a flavor so real it had shocked my palate. I added the smell of the damp earth, the feeling of the rough-hewn stone walls. I created a collage, a symphony of the flawed, the broken, the real. It was everything our world had erased. It was ugly, chaotic, and jarring. It was dissonant, and it was the most beautiful thing I had ever made. But it needed a final element. It needed a bridge. It needed to speak to the ghosts in their perfect palaces. So I turned the loom inward, on myself. I poured in my own story, my loneliness in the gleaming towers, my feeling of stillness, of being a spectator to life, the hollow ache of my own perfection. I rendered the image of my own smooth, flawless face, and then, with an act of pure imagination and will, I superimposed the image of a tear. Not a perfect, poetic tear like the ones I used to profile, but a raw, ugly, soul-wrenching sob. The sob of a beautiful man in a perfect prison. I wove it all together, a chaotic tapestry of pain and beauty, of perfection and flaws, of the lie and the truth. I encrypted it, compressed it, and set it to broadcast. Not to a single gallery, but to every public holoscreen in Ethelberg. Every street corner, every plaza, every maglev car, every private home terminal. I piggybacked the signal on the Aegis's own secure network, using the access codes Kyle had so foolishly left me with. My final act was to title the piece. I didn't call it The Dissonance or The Truth. I gave it a simple, provocative title that would be impossible to ignore. A question. What is the cost? My finger hovered over the broadcast icon. This was the true point of no return. They wouldn't just reconcile me after this. This was an act of open rebellion, an act of informational terrorism. It was my end, but it could be their beginning. A seed of doubt planted in the heart of the perfect machine. I thought of Lyra, her scar being lasered away into smooth, meaningless skin. I thought of the children of the echo, being conditioned to smile on cue. I thought of my entire race, fading into beautiful, sterile oblivion. My choice was made. I was no longer a profiler. I was a creator. And this was my masterpiece. With a final shuddering breath, I pressed the icon, and I gave my soul to the city. The broadcast was instantaneous. A silent, digital shockwave that rippled through the central nervous system of Ethelberg. For a single suspended moment, nothing happened. Nothing. Then, the city stopped. On the grand hollow screen in Unity Plaza, a perfectly resonant advertisement for mood-enhancing perfume flickered and died. It was replaced by the raw, jagged image of Lyra's scar, rendered in stark, intimate detail. In the maglev cars, the serene, looping vistas of mountain ranges vanished, supplanted by the magnificent, wrinkled landscape of Silas's face. In 1,000 sky-level apartments, The faces of perfectly beautiful people watching their evening entertainments were interrupted by the image of a crooked carrot, then by the raw, unrestrained laughter of a child with asymmetrical ears. It was a visual and emotional assault. The images were not framed or contextualized. They were just there, ugly, dissonant, real. The broadcast carried no narration, only the symphony of resonance I had woven into it. The pain of the falling beam, the earthy taste of the soil, the deep, abiding wisdom in an old man's eyes, the defiant fire in Lyra's. And then the final image appeared, broadcast across every screen in the city. My own perfect face, beautiful and empty, with a single digitally rendered tear of profound despair carving a path down my cheek. The question hung beneath it, a silent scream. What is the cost? The reaction was not what the authorities would have expected. There was no mass panic. There was only a profound, collective stillness. But this was not the stillness of emptiness. It was the stillness of shock, of revelation. In a penthouse apartment, a high-ranking minister, a man whose face was a famous portrait of serene authority, stared at the image of my tear. He unconsciously lifted a hand to his own smooth cheek, a strange, unidentifiable ache blooming in his chest. In a school for the city's elite children, a young girl, praised for her exceptional joyful resonance, watched the image of the dissonant children laughing. She looked at her own reflection in the dark screen and for the first time felt that her perfect, practiced smile was a cage. In a reconciliation chamber, Kyle watched the feed on a security monitor, his face crumbling from righteous anger into horrified disbelief. He saw not just the filth he had tried to erase, but the soul of the friend he had just betrayed. He saw the story I had tried to tell him, and in the devastating light of my public confession, he finally, terribly, understood. The alarm in my chamber blared, a screeching counterpoint to the city's silence. The door burst open. Aegis wardens flooded in, their movements no longer smooth and efficient, but clumsy with panic. They saw me lying on the couch, my datapad fallen to the floor, my face serene. I had given everything. I was empty, but not still. I was complete. My end was swift and silent. There was no public trial. That would only legitimize my message. There was no martyrdom. I was simply erased. Elian, the resonance profiler, officially ceased to exist. His record wiped, his works archived under a different name, his memory a ghost. But you cannot erase a scar once the world has seen it. The story does not end with me. It ends with the seed I planted. The question, what is the cost, became a silent mantra, a ghost in the machine of their perfect world. People began to look at each other differently. They started searching for the tiny, almost imperceptible imperfections that the harmonization hadn't quite managed to erase. A slightly off-center eye, a barely visible freckle, the faint lines that appeared around the eyes during a genuine, unrestrained laugh. These tiny flaws, once ignored, became points of fascination, secret treasures. The dissonance, the members of the echo were not all cured. My broadcast had thrown the system into chaos. Many, including Silas, were processed and reintegrated, their flaws erased, their memories dampened. They became beautiful, placid citizens, but with a deep, inexplicable sadness in their eyes, the phantom limb of a lost identity. But some escaped. During the confusion of the raid and its aftermath, a small group, led by a fiercely determined woman, slipped away into the deepest, unmapped levels of the undercroft. The final scene is not in a gleaming tower or a sterile chamber. It is months later, in a cavern deep beneath the city, lit by the faint glow of phosphorescent moss. A small community is forming again, smaller and more cautious than before. Lyra stands at the entrance to the cavern, looking out into the darkness. Her face is unchanged. The Aegis had taken her, prepped her for regressive therapy. But Kael, broken by what he had done, had arranged for a processing error. A single act of rebellion, of penance. He had let her escape. She raises a hand and gently, lovingly traces the jagged line of her scar. It is no longer just a mark of her own survival. It is now my memorial. It is the emblem of our shared story. It is a symbol of a terrible cost and a fragile hope. Another figure joins her. A young boy from the Echo, no more than 10, who had also escaped. He looks at her, then timidly touches his own cheek, where a small, pale birthmark sits like a tiny cloud. Before, he had been taught to hide it. Now, he looks at it with a dawning sense of wonder. "Is that a story too?" he asks, his voice soft. Lyra looks from the boy's innocent face to the darkness ahead, the future unknown. A smile touches her lips. It is not a resonant smile, designed to captivate or perform. It is a real smile, tired, sad, but resilient. It is the most beautiful expression the world has ever known. "Yes," she whispers, her voice full of a strength that can only be born from imperfection. It's the beginning of one. The revolution was not a war. It was a change in perception. A whisper that beauty is not the absence of flaws, but the story they tell. And in a world built on the lie of perfection, the most profound truth, the most powerful rebellion, began with the revelation of a single glorious scar.